not enjoying being at the bench and doing the experiment. My strength is collecting that global worldview, that global information, those pieces of the puzzles that other researchers and scientists so diligently collected. And the biological intelligence requires to put that data through the senses, through repetition, which is the mother of all learning, into the brain. That way our brain can process it. It is about educating those researchers by giving them the up-to-date, easy to digest, easy language.
And that's wonderful. So I'm right to assume that what you are suggesting, that if we want to be an intergalactic species, we need to start by becoming intercontinental species.
Wow, that is beautiful and very insightful indeed. Yes, so we need to collaborate to the space environment. We need to overcome those barriers and become more connected.
Hello and welcome to Rocket Biologist, the show where we meet experts in medicine and biology. I'm your host, Dr. Adeel Nasir. In this episode, we will continue our conversation with Dr. Ekaterina Koshuina. To follow the discussion, please listen to episode 1 of season 1. The link is in the description. You touch upon a lot the advantages of human hibernation, how it can help to, avoid different kind of problems that you may encounter in space. You talked about microgravity, you talked about radiations and other kind of, elements of space that can drastically affect human physiology. But what about the hibernation process itself? So far, it's experimental. It has never been tested in human. If I understand, we are not natural hibernators. So if ever, if it happens, so what are the possible disadvantages that you can share with us that, for learning purposes, what would that be?
Yeah, after seeing everything that is the way research is going, I strongly believe we will see this as a normal, solution, as a normal strategy in our lifetime, in our generation. And that's actually one of my motivations. I chose hibernation research because when I'm older and I want to say to my kids, when I was younger, I contributed to that research. I think it is quite possible to induce a state of lower metabolism. We may call it by, we might be able to do it like the bears or like the squirrels. We don't know exactly yet, but what we do know is that there are clues that we are capable of doing that. So one straightforward one is that we lower our metabolism when we sleep. Every day, the heart rate, the respiratory rate lowers, the temperature lowers, and our consciousness becomes decreased. It is a state of lower metabolism. Then there's also a state that happens that afflicts people, which we consider that a problem, seasonal affective disorder. So people who live in areas where there is winter and there is less light during the winter times, they get into the state of, we call it depression, because they get lower energy, they want to rest more, they want to sleep, they don't want to do much, they actually gain weight. And for our modern society, that is a problem, but there are clues in there. It might be something that is, like a vestige. And also, when we look at talking about multidisciplinary clues and fields, when we look into archaeology and the things that are left for us to study is teeth, because they don't degrade, and bones also. When we look into that, there are some signs that primitive humans were able, they had periods of lower metabolism. So, because before, winter was not something that we had all the tools to survive, people had to go into strategies of lower metabolism. Also during famine times, there are some reports that peasants will go into states of just decreasing food intake, not moving as much, and conserving as much energy as possible. There's an article in back in 1900 calling it human hibernation. Well, it was because of famines. We don't have that now. So I do strongly see that it is possible. As far as what are the disadvantages of it? Well, right now, many, because we don't know how to do it right. And even the seasonal affective disorder, it's interfering with our modern world that is requiring us to be active 24, well, not 24/7, but, depending if you're in New York or if you're in other environments, it requires that activity. We don't need to go into lower activity. No, now we have light, artificial light. We can be working, like, for example, right now I'm doing night shifts. So you're able to adjust your environment. So the question will be more of like, how can we do it better for the setting of space travel? We're still working on that because we don't know how to induce it safely. It's at the very beginnings. And then for the other applications, we want to get the benefits and not the side effects. So right now we know that if we go immobile for a while, our muscles atrophy. So it is about getting the signals right in the brain that will take us to a safer state of lower metabolism for the purpose that you need it, when you need it.
All right. So let's say that, we can figure that out sooner than later. So what I understood from your earlier elaboration about the hibernation, so humans are not considered as natural hibernators. So is there any under clinical settings that anyone tried to induce hibernation state, or what's the status of that research?
Yes, absolutely. So we're not natural hibernators as far as we know. It's not very obvious, but there's some case reports of humans, like, for example, when during accidents, when they fall into cold waters, there are a good number of people who were, you could say, clinically dead, according to different standards. But in medicine, because of the surprises that we've got, there's a saying: a person is not dead until a person is considered dead until they are warm and dead. So it is when people get cooled, they go into a state of low metabolism, but they don't lose that ability to come back to life. So that made me think about the first chapter in the textbook, which is about talking about metabolism, about life, about the second law of thermodynamics, because it's important to understand those basics. We humans, we are an organized organism. And in physics, entropy increases. So the natural state of the world is for entropy to increase. But when we create life is organized, so it goes against entropy. So it's negative entropy. So if you want to have life, you need to invest energy to go against entropy, to have organization. So it is about reaching that level of what is the minimum energy necessary. That way you don't go to the other side of entropy and degrade into the natural state of the world. So it seems that there are specific thresholds that we are able to reach, to get closer to, before actually dying. And the natural hibernators, they harness those states to be like closer. They can get dangerously close, but they preserve that energy. So, well, we know that humans have survived those states of coldness, Then we also know of some case reports when, for example, they have some kind of brain damage, either from strokes or trauma or autoimmune conditions, when they just are, when their temperature just becomes lower, and they have lower heart rate, they have lower body temperature, and they get into those kind of states. So those are interesting humans. Also the seasonal affective disorder. So again, these are not somewhat natural states. But then for the other question, the targeted temperature management is something that has been used a lot on a lot of people. And well, they go into a state of lowered metabolism of a temperature of low 30s. That has been studied. But also another strategy that was being used is for trauma care. When a person comes in really bad shape, there's a limited time for the surgeons to be able to see what they can do. And there has been protocols for lowering the body temperature as low as like 10 degrees centigrade in order to reach a state of suspended animation. That way it buys the surgeons time to see if they're able to repair the person. That was an interesting component. So it's something that is, we can say, it can be everyday life for some practitioners. But recently, one of the exciting research that we are quite inspired by is the use of medications to induce that lower metabolic state more upstream. And it is at the University of Pittsburgh. They are trying to go. They recruited healthy volunteers to use a medication that is already FDA approved. It's an anesthetic to try to induce a longer sleep and see what happens. So that is for a relatively short period of time, but already a lot, 10 days. So to sleep for most of the day, to be in that state of quietness, of sleep, of decreased consciousness and metabolism, but waking up 4 hours per day, and then for cycles of 10 days. So there's already a push into being able to experiment with humans, which is quite challenging because you have a lot of ethical regulations. So one of my chapters also includes the state of like how to do the research, what are the regulations, and how to navigate that. And one of the strategies that was genius, and that was also part of the new revolution in artificial intelligence, is what the colleagues at Harvard did, is that they compared the molecules that work in animal models, but they have their own troubles. They compared them to the already FDA approved medications, and they found that the shape is very similar to a whole bunch of them. So they started studying medications that already are approved. So it is like an off-label use. So that is, imagine if we can share that knowledge with the other researchers, that will propel their research. It's that kind of details and creativity and sharing of knowledge that is going to make the difference. So humans are venturing into that, being able to try those states.
Okay, so that seems like that, that this could be the drug-induced hibernation. And basically, again, that you mentioned that, it's related to anesthesia, right? So it's basically doing something with certain part of the brain. So, and there you already talked about that there may be some, we have that shared genetics with bears, that it is being sort of activated. Is that correct to assume?
Indeed, that is the hypothesis, to activate those pathways. Like, for example, well, right now we're expecting our second child, and the changes that happen in the body are fascinating. So those changes, they are very dramatic, and they don't happen always, but with the right signaling, they happen with the help of hormones. mostly. And well, yes, the brain, because that is what orchestrates everything. The brain is the leadership center for the cells in our body. So in a similar way, the goal is to activate those neurological pathways. And also you were asking about what is the device, right? There are some devices that are able to do stimulation with ultrasound in the brain to activate the areas that are involved in states of lower metabolism, such as the hippocampus, some specific areas there, that create a state of hypometabolism in natural hibernators that are capable of doing that, but also in non-natural hibernators. So I think it will be a combination of those things. So some form of brain stimulation that will feed back, some medication, some chemical molecules to help with these things, but also the way the natural hibernators do it. They activate their brain through their senses, to decrease lighting, decreased oral intake. There's the circadian rhythm, but also lower temperature, the different things. So it just like it happens in the natural world. It's not just one thing. There's no magic pill. It's a combination of things.
Wonderful. So, what would be which organ would be most affected in a positive and negative way by hibernation? Any thoughts about that?
All of them adapt. The brain shuts down specific parts that are not being used, but other parts become even more active. They do control temperature. It's like you go into a savings mode. But what's fascinating is that some parts become, they go into like like when you close your house for winter, you cover things up, but other areas are more active. So it is a complete adaptation of the entire body. It is a state that utilizes, that decreases the functions that we don't need for basic survival and keeps the background running to not go into entropy.
Okay, that makes sense. So now I have a very specific question that is closer to my heart because it's going down to the cellular biology. So you talked about with the reference to mammalian organisms that, this is multicellular organisms you have studied. So in lab, like if I want to study hypothetically the hibernation state, so at the cellular level, so are there any like cellular models that have been used, and what are the possible pathways people are looking into it? Do you have any idea about that?
Absolutely. So all of that is important because it is a state of so many perspectives. The cells make adjustment at the epigenetic level, at the molecular level. There is transcriptional changes. So if you like hibernation, you can study it from all different kinds of perspectives, from observing the whole organism to the different organs, to measuring the genes and the transcriptomes, to the epigenetics. Now we also have this concept of organ on a chip, which allows you to study the effects of basically a mini organ-like structure. Yeah, in a chip that is more accessible, that is, it is fascinating. But there is a need to study hypometabolic states at all kinds of levels, because the changes that happen in our biological machinery, well, any change, it is triggered by the genetic material, because that is the instructions for what the cells need to do. So that is the smallest component of it. So that is where it starts. So it is extremely important, and there is a lot of research. It is complicated because it's not one gene. It is lots of adaptations that happened, from protection, like the cells increase the number of antioxidants they produce. They create a lot of messenger RNA. That way it is available there. Some protein synthesis decreases, other increases. So it's the cells undergo quite a lot of changes. And yes, certainly it happens at the DNA level, the instructions.
All right. Okay, so now you touched upon a little bit about the ethical implications. So what do you see? What could be the broader ethical implications of hibernation on and off planet?
There are many of them. One perspective is that once we discover hibernation, its benefits may not be available to everyone. Like even hypothermia protocol, it is not available in all hospitals. I work in many different hospitals as a disaster management doctor, and I see that the same human condition will be treated relatively differently in different hospitals depending on the resources, because even though there are guidelines, but then reality hits in. And also, with COVID, when I was practicing in the US, we were struggling with ICU beds, but then in Mexico, people barely had access to oxygen, so they died from lack of oxygen. So it is that kind of imbalances that we see, those differences. And then the other part is scientific research itself. Thankfully, and because of the horrors that happened in the past, of how science was done before, thankfully now there are laws and regulations that scientists and scientific bodies follow as on how to do research properly without causing harm. And I think also with technology, we are able to bypass a lot of the studies that can be done experimentally on humans or on animals and practice them in simulated environments in computers, which so far they are non-sentient. So it is about asking that question quite often of how can we do no harm while trying to achieve our goal.
All right. So that's still an open debate. I think we should continue talking about that. So the next question would be that, do you see that, the hibernation process has a commercial appeal? Like people want to, make money out of this by adapting that process in medicine or somewhere else. So have ever people asked you for your opinion, if they want to start a, startup or something? And what do you think? So what's your thought about that?
Actually, yes. One of the comments that I was surprised by when I talk about it with people in general is that they say, it's like, yes, please, I would like to hibernate. And that was quite striking to me because, with all the projects that I have, I wish I had more energy to be able to achieve them. So going into a state of when you just are not being able to function and do anything, it was quite shocking to my personality and to my way of life. But many people have mentioned that they would like to hibernate, not for space travel purposes, not for recovering from trauma or from terrible medical problems, but just recreationally for psychological health or from challenging times. And it made me realize and appreciate how fortunate we can be in wanting to be alive and wanting to be in the environment, in the life that we're in, because for other people and for other circumstances, it might be too challenging. Like, for example, during wartime, it will be great to actually go to sleep and weather the war until it happens, or during challenging emotional times. People will benefit from that. So it has that application that is relatively, you could say, it's not exactly medical. It could be more like recreational, but it's quite useful and quite important. But also, well, I just recently saw a company that was well, they sell this product. It's based on hibernation research for the heart. The long story short, but when our heart gets a heart attack, those cells can also go into hibernation mode and not get affected as much. And there are some molecules that actually can help. So the scientists are promoting those strategies. And well, it's not available for everyone in mass production, but it is something that starts to be available to some people who can afford it as some strategies. So definitely there's lots of applications. Another surprising thing, that because I follow hibernation research, so I get the updates of what is new. So I saw that people were putting patents, right? And I was like, oh, well, what is that? And one of the patents, well, a good number of patents is for putting fish to hibernate. Why? Because, well, you want to transport them fresh. And usually we use coldness, which is good, but it is better if they have their own protective mechanisms against spoilage, right? So if you lower their metabolism so they don't get stressed, they don't die, but they still can keep fresh and protect themselves against entropy and spoilage, then that is such an important application for transporting fish and for having less losses of that fish. So that will also, it's a commercial application, but also it has the implications of decreasing waste and therefore leading to decrease in the amount of fishing that needs to be done. So fascinating applications.
Fascinating, because it makes me think that, this can, taking it from what you just explained me, it can be used for preservation of animal-based food for that longer period of time, no? That sounds like, I think a lot of people will definitely reach out to you after that podcast. I'm sure about that. Wonderful. So talking about heart, so you talk about that, heart get the benefit of being in hibernation. So what about the broken hearts? Can they get benefit, from hibernation?
Well, heart transplants, there's a lot of research into organ transplantation because one of the major limitations is time. The organs degrade, the structure collapses, and the entropy problem, right? So the strategies that we have in preserving organs such as heart and kidneys and other organs, well, they do use cold and they do use some substances, but there is an increased interest in the strategies that the hibernators use because they are able, their organs are preserved, are able to stay fresher longer, and it is part of the cell. So it is about discovering those molecules, because it all boils down to molecules and strategies. But also in heart disease, when we get heart attacks. A heart attack is when there's not enough blood going to a tissue, to the cells, because the cells depend, they have their functions, they depend on oxygen that is delivered by the blood. So if the blood supply is interrupted, they don't get what they need, and they, well, get into entropy and die. So that there is, even when I'm looking for research, sometimes it can be, at first it was annoying because they use the word hibernation in heart tissue after a heart attack. So at first I was like, oh, I have to ignore all this. But now I value that research because it is an application for cardiovascular disease, which is part of the top 3 killers of modern society. So if we can also apply some of that knowledge, research, and wisdom there, we can help a lot of people to survive this limitation that we get with these heart attack problems. So
Well,
yes.
I think my question was more like a metaphoric question, that if someone has a broken heart, can hibernation help? But I think you explained it very well. But that let's keep the heart going. That's more important than anything. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's now boils down to one important question. You've been to this research for a long time, and I can see that, how fascinating you find it and how connected you are. So here it is. Would you like to go through, hibernation process yourself? Would you like to hibernate?
I think no, but it will be good to do it once to see how it feels like. And the reason why not is because I feel fortunate, as I was mentioning, that I want to do so many things, that the world is fascinating, that there's so much to learn, that there's so much to do, that there's so much life to see, that I don't want to shut down my brain and my senses. I want to be alive. I want to be able to see and enjoy and participate and give of myself to this world and interact with it. But I don't know if sometimes conditions will, actually in my childhood and the young, the beginnings of life, it was quite hard. So one of the strategies that I use to, distract the brain from this is education. So I think that was one kind of, hypometabolism distraction. Some people use drugs or alcohol to numb the senses, to numb the brain. So I was quite lucky to have discovered education to distract myself from that environment. But right now, I'm fascinated by the environment that I see. But if the conditions are rough, I think it will be good to ask that question again, and perhaps that will be a good option. Some people have proposed that it can be used for diseases that we might not have the answer for and treatments for now, but that are like getting there, like for example, cancers or other diseases that are in progress. So technically you can slow down a person and put them into a hypometabolic state until technology and science advances for those conditions, being able to extend life. So possibly then, but then from the other perspective, I think it is important to be able to experiment it in your own body to understand what it feels like. Because we can look at things and we can observe it with our senses, but until we actually sense it more profoundly, we don't know how it feels like. So yes and no.
Wonderful. So, what's your advice for non-traditional spacefaring countries, and if they want to become part of this fascinating journey of space exploration, but for example, the space medicine?
Mm-hmm. Well, my advice is to dream big. Give yourself the permission to dream big, because my story is that I come from, I actually grew up in South America, in Ecuador, under very challenging conditions. And I didn't even dream about the life that I have right now. So I didn't know what was possible. And what I see with my experience is that there are many people who go through the same surprises. They get impressed by what they have achieved by just pursuing their setting a goal, setting a dream, and just pursuing it, giving themselves permission to just say, well, what if? Let's give it a try. And they surprise themselves by achieving that. And actually, one of the challenges afterwards is like trying to find what is the next goal. That way you can keep that motivation alive. What is the next unreachable star? What is the next purpose? So because I have seen what is possible, not just myself, from where I come from the challenges that I come from, um, and what is able to be achieved and what is still to come, but also from other people that I've met myself personally, so I can attest to their progress, but also the books that are constantly written with the possibility of what we're capable of. So it's important to allow yourself to dream what calls to your heart. And even though it might seem far away, especially when we're kids, when we're kids, we're very vulnerable. Everything is difficult, it's like even walking takes learning. So when we're kids, we are limited relatively temporarily. But if it calls you, it's okay. You may not know how to get there, but just have that dream. Give yourself permission to do that, and you will see just also taking that step at a time, keeping the eye on the goal. There's the neurological evidence that your brain will be more alert to the opportunities, because there's so many opportunities. It's just that we don't process them all. But when you identify that goal, your brain will alert you. It's like, oh, if you look, there is that choice that you can make that will bring you closer to it. So, actually on my phone, I have an alarm that says every day to remind me, to keep me focused, like, what are you doing for space medicine today? And initially it took time to build that habit, but now it is much more prominent, and it is becoming stronger and stronger. So the first part is to give yourself permission to dream. Follow your heart, because each person's dreams are different. Some people have different preferences, and they have different callings and different talents, that have different activities that they enjoy. When people tell you something is impossible, it's okay to be realistic and to understand that, so you don't go into dangerous situations. But many times through history, and many people have done it repeatedly, they have defined the goals, the targets of what is possible, the limits of what is possible. We used to say, the sky is the limit, reach high for the sky. And then, NASA told us that the sky is not the limit. So they are able to reach higher with the shuttles and the rockets. And then an inspiring quote that always gives me those chills is by an astronaut who says, I know the sky is not the limit because there are footprints on the moon, and I made them. So it's always something that activates those emotional components in me, of what is possible and what is important. To give yourself permission, because many times we are our biggest obstacles.
Wonderful. That's so insightful. So this last question is like, you've been through a long career that as a woman, and even though we talk about that, still there's a lot of need for a lot of women to work in that area of research. As you mentioned that earlier, that growing up, all science heroes were men. So this is now changing. So if you have to say one sentence to a little girl sitting in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in India, in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and the list goes on, in Africa, in Europe, US, what would be your message who want to become a scientist and inspired?
I was that girl, because when I was growing in Ecuador, our resources were very limited. And then I had even more obstacles. And the way it worked for me is that by asking, what I may not be able to reach that and to solve that problem right now, right? I would love to, but what can I do? What do I have in my power right now that can take me closer to my goal or to something? What do I have in my power right now that one step, the journey of 1,000 miles, that big project, that beautiful, unreachable star that keeps us inspired and motivated, that big dream, what can I do to take that journey now? And you will realize that it may be just, you have so much in your power, from making the choice of watching an educational program where you learn about what you want to be versus watching something that is um, relatively, we can say, junk or misinformation or not very beneficial. It's like you have that the power of choice, from the choices that you do with food that you take, the people with whom you interact, the material, the information that you have, that you expose yourself with. You have a lot of power right now, regardless of where you are. And also, there are many opportunities in the state environment, in the conditions where you are, that you may not see right now. But for example, I recall now back the benefits of being a student. People want to help you. When you grow more, it changes. So there are opportunity in every step in our life. And everywhere we are, it's because that is where our journey is. And, the travelers say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And that's extremely important, because I realized the value of that. Once you reach that destination, that impossible star, unreachable star, that beautiful goal, it's like, okay, now what? You get into like a state of limbo, because you don't have that that goal, that project. So it's about enjoying that process, that everyday life of how you reached it. And then, it's about also, when people get everything to them, when they're giving things, their brain doesn't like it. We are meant to achieve, we are meant to overcome challenges. Challenges, and how we overcome them, can be what we call saludogenic, which means it's healthy for us. So when we don't have those things, those goals to pursue, we become depressed. People die when people retire. They die faster because they don't have that purpose. They lose that. So it's about enjoying the process wherever, whichever state, whichever environment, whichever stage you are, because even in video games, you start at specific levels and then advance. You don't jump from one level to another, but it's a process. And if there's no way, you make it. I've received some interesting comments from men in the field who said, well, in order to be, you cannot call yourself space medicine doctor because you need to have this credentialing. But it's not about, it's one definition. But then I found my niche little by little by following my passions on how I can contribute with what I like. So I may not want to do an extra degree and training to get that certificate and be called by some organization, you're a space medicine doctor. But I built my own way that other people can follow. And it is a completely valid way. And that is what we see with a lot of women. Because the pathway that men undergo is quite different. So many women had to discover their way. But that's even more beautiful, because then you build it yourself. You have that benefit of saying, I didn't just follow blindly. I figured it out, and there were discoveries, and it was an impressive journey. So you can write books about it, and you can share about it, and it's our story. And enjoy it. Enjoy it. You have what you have right now is very valuable, regardless of what it may feel like. The grass is always greener on the other side, but start with gratitude and seeing what can you do today with what you have.
Wonderful. So that is very, very insightful. I think the message that can be extracted that we should enjoy the journey itself, not always being bothered by the destiny. All right. So I think on that note, I would say that thanks a lot, Doctor. It was wonderful talking to you, and it's an honor that I was able to talk and learn a lot about you. And I hope that is not the first time and last time. I would be bothering you now and then, and just checking on that, how's your research is progressing, because I think it's fascinating and people should know about that. And about your project, I think I would put that in the show notes that people can access to that, right? That is correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, wonderful. And remember, collaboration happens at the top, competition happens at the bottom. The goal is to build synergy. So collaboration, that's what we're aiming for.
Yep. As I said earlier, let's try to become intercontinental to achieve the dream of being intergalactic species.
Beautifully said.
Thank you. So on that note, have a great day and talk to you soon next time. My cosmic comrades, we will continue our intergalactic conversation in the next episode. Until then, stay curious and stay connected as we are just beginning our odyssey into the heart of the universe.